Hi, I hope everyone's doing well today. So I actually just did a recording, extended recording about this, it's talking about Dexter and the deeper parts of Dexter. So I thought I would just give a quick rundown over all of my notes in case you don't want the full 1 hour version. This is the quick version that I wrote. I talked about the themes of Dexter and how each season actually revolved around a different theme. The first season was about trauma. The second season was about addictions and dealing with addictions. The third season and overcoming them. The third season was about partnerships and relationships and things like that. The fourth season was about family and certain aspects and dynamics of family, and just things that we may do to keep traditions going in families. The fifth season was about healing, especially healing from PTSD or trauma. The sixth season was about faith and religion and just putting your faith in certain things and what that can how that can manifest. And you see the dark sides and the light sides of, religion, things like that throughout the show. The seventh season of Dexter revolved around the idea of love or the topic of love. The eighth season of Dexter revolved around psychology, psychopath, but psychology for the most part, and just therapy. Um, the ninth season, which would be Dexter New Blood, revolved around the idea of parenting and what it means to be a parent. I also want to talk about, I thought it would be interesting to talk about the seven deadly sins and how they correlated with the characters. Dexter was gluttony, Rita was sloth, Dokes was wrath, Deb was envy, Maria LaGuerta was greed, Vince was lust, and Angel was pride. Um, we also talked about the characters and what a lot of the characters represented. Um, the idea of Dexter and it being very claustrophobic is very much in alignment with the idea that this show is actually going on in Dexter's mind or his head, and that each of the characters in the show are actually representations of who he is, or they're representations of what he's going through inside. Each one of his victims that he kills is actually a problem or situation that he's going through, and him killing a certain victim is actually him killing a certain part of himself that he does not want to be a part of him or his life. So, main characters that I wrote down: Dexter. Dexter's character represents darkness. Rita, innocence. Dokes represents getting caught. Deb represents Dexter's humanity, or humanity. Maria LaGuerta represents authority. Vince, fun. Angel Batista represents righteousness. Quinn represents honesty. Detective Matthews is a higher authority or backup authority that does not want to compromise, is not willing to compromise. Harry is inner voice and consciousness, conscience, and not the dark passenger, the code. Harrison represents Dexter's light. Aster and Cody represent Dexter's expressional emotion, his emotions, and moving on and coping from hardships. Paul represents abusiveness, being abusive. Anton represents the idea of living a normal, happy life. Lundy represents history and cycles. Christina, the cop from season four. No, 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 no. I'm sorry. Zoe Kruger, from season four, represents um, the idea of killing one's family, and Dexter does not want to kill his family, so he kills her. Christina, the reporter, Christine Hill, represents daddy issues and how that manifests. Jonah, Trinity's son, represents breaking cycles. Brother Sam represents the connection with God. Um, Nick, the character that Brother Sam baptized in the river, Nick represents the idea of crossroads and different crossroads leading to different paths in life. Sylvia, which is Miguel's wife, represents relocating one's heart into a different space or atmosphere. Lumen represents renewal and healing. Hannah represents love. Dr. Vogel represents motherhood and therapy. And George King, the Skinner from season three, the Skinner tree trimmer represents this idea, this false idea of chasing a ghost or chasing an idea that doesn't actually exist. And yeah, I also talked about the special guest characters. Brian representing evil, Lila representing chaos, being a chaos junkie. Miguel represents self-indulgence, um, overindulgence, overindulgence. I'm sorry. Trinity represents family and tradition. Jordan Chase represents wrath. Travis Marshall represents serving a power that's higher, um, versus a free will, but serving a higher power. Isaac Serco represents rage and revenge. Oliver Saxon from season 8 represents being a psychopath. And in New Blood, Kurt represents blending into society, when hiding one's dark side, but blending into society, and everyone thinking, "Oh, this is an amazing person." I also went into this thing where each season of Dexter actually reflected each of the layers of hell. The first layer being limbo, second being lust. First layer being limbo. Second lust. Third gluttony. Fourth greed. Fifth anger. And then heresy, violence, fraud, and then new blood goes into treachery. Each of the main villains from each season actually reflects these in such a way, especially in how they were not only portrayed, but how they were actually kind of punished in a way. The first layer is limbo, and we see Brian stuck in limbo. His character returns as a ghost multiple times throughout the show. Lila's character from season 2, she was lust, and the punishment there was to be endlessly caught up in the winds of chaos because no one can find sense of balance within themselves. And she was a chaos junkie, and her emotions were all over the place, and that's layer. That was her sin, her character. The third is gluttony, and that was Miguel, constantly trying to consume and constantly eating all the time. And the punishment was to lie in mud or slush or icy slush or muddy slush, which happened to him at the end. The fourth, greed, is was Trinity, and the punishment there was to fight for eternity, which the fight for eternity is manifested in this idea of him continuing the cycle of what Dexter went through and continuing that cycle within um, Harrison's character. The fifth season was about anger. That's the fifth layer of hell, anger. And the punishment there is to endlessly fight through anger. And that is when the main villain, Jordan Chase, was actually arguing with with Lumen, who ended up killing him at the end. They were both yelling at each other, and through that rage is how Jordan Chase was killed. The sixth season was about heresy, which is about twisting the mythology and idea of God and religion and using it for one's own benefits. And one of the punishments there was burning in a tomb, which you would see that when Travis was stabbed with a sword, and where he was stabbed, the building was burned down along with his body, which was laying on a tomb. Season 7 was about violence, and Isaac, the mafia guy, was going around killing people, doing drive-by shootings, shooting up Colombian people, uh, cutting people, stabbing them in the eyes, making people commit suicide. He was very violent. And that's what the season 7 villain Isaac was about, violence. The punishment there is to die in the ocean of blood. He died in the ocean where Dexter dropped his victims, and he bled out from his gunshot wounds all over Dexter's boat, showing this ocean of blood is where Dexter's victims were. The next one was about fraud, and there was a lot of fraud. There was a lot of punishments through that one. Um, but that was Saxon, the season 8 villain. Um, yeah. And so the last one was the ninth layer of hell, the ninth circle of hell, which is actually an icy area. And the ninth season of Dexter, which is New Blood, is in snow. So the decoration of the devil's body is actually shown how Kurt displayed his victims toward the end of the show, with the top half being shown as a display. Um, so yeah, each season of Dexter did reflected a different layer of hell, and it would make sense because the first layer of hell was limbo, and the first season of Dexter was very eerie and very morbid, and it had a weird feeling to it. So it would make sense now why that feeling was there. Anyway, Dexter. So if the entire show of Dexter was actually about this, but the character overcoming every layer of hell, then that means Dexter New Blood was the last layer, last circle of hell. So now he is out of hell, which means he is resurrected, which makes sense why the new Dexter is called Dexter Resurrection. I wonder what the original sin was that caused this character Dexter to fall down these circles of hell. Hopefully, we find that out by the end of Original Sin. Anyway, so I'm excited to see Dexter Resurrection. This is the short version of what I spent an hour talking about. If you want to listen to the whole hour, it's available. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this and have a great day.